I'm going to tell you tonight about an experience that I had one summer. It was the summer of, I believe, 1973. It was right after my first year teaching in Lake Town, which is, of course, on the south end of Bear Lake. And we had rented a house there and we're staying in it. We had 2 children at the time, and it would have 3 that coming fall. So that's kind of our circumstance. I didn't have much money. My very first teaching contract was for $6,300 a year. And that was not a lot of money even then. And of course, you probably gasped when you heard it now, because prices of things have all gone up and people earn more than that. Even at some of the poorest jobs around, you'd earn more than that. It's almost unheard of to earn that little with anything these days. But anyway, we were always trying to find some way to earn extra money, and I guess the word got out. And one of my wife's cousins, who lived down in the Ogden area, had a husband who worked at Thiokol Chemical Corporation, which was, they did a lot of different kinds of contracting, but part of what they were famous for is the aerospace rocket booster contracts, and they had other contracts. Well, it so happened that they had a contract with, I can't tell you the name of the company, but the contract, I can tell you the purpose of it. The contract was to test waste sewage treatment apparatuses on houseboats. Now you may say, well, how would they do that? Well, they had a system where people that used the houseboats, after they were done using all of the toilets and all that, and they had excess water, they would drain it and put it into I think it was an circular aluminum closet. It was in a closet, but it was a circular aluminum holding tank, where they would then set fire to it and burn off the contents. And so happened that this summer, when I was working at Lake Town, the word got out. This husband of the cousin of my wife's thought of me because they wanted to do it at Bear Lake, and they had bought a houseboat, a 38-foot dual engine houseboat, rear drive. It was quite a large boat. They had to get special permission to park it at the Bear Lake Marina, and back in those days, the marina wasn't filled up with regular parking. There was a big open areas, and the only way they could accommodate it was to set some buoys out there and put cement chunks down to hold the buoys in place, and then they'd put some hooks and chains and things so that I could drive the houseboat in there, or whoever could, and hook up, and it would hold it in place. The way you'd get out to it was with a rowboat, and tie the rowboat off to one of the buoys, and then get in the houseboat and start it up and leave. Well, it kind of took me by surprise, because they offered me the job, and they wanted me to come down to the it was west of Brigham City quite a ways, but to their home facility there, and sign some paperwork and get all registered with the company, Thiokol Chemical Corporation. and then come up, and I would be assigned to drive this boat, and they would have somebody come up and train me how to do it. So anyway, I decided I'll try to do it, and maybe I can make some extra money this summer, supplement what I earned during the school year teaching. So I did that, and they sent somebody up, all right. So happened that when they sent them up, it was raining that weekend. And the guy they sent up to show me how to run the boat didn't know how to run really the boat, even himself, very well. So he was looking in the manual for answers, and we were trying to figure it out, and didn't dare take it out because it was raining and stormy. And so I could tell I was going to be in trouble, because he went off and left me to, anyway, signed me off on the training without really training me, and left, and I was there to take care of the boat. So here's how they did it. They would have their employees during the summer months, so it matched my summer off schedule just fine. They would have their employees sign up, down the Thicol employees I'm talking about. They would have them sign up and take their families on vacation to Bear Lake to be on the houseboat. Because after all, it took the families to make sewage, which I would then pump and burn off and test in this new treatment facility that they had on the houseboat, which is why they had the contract to begin with. So there's a whole string of people that had signed their families up to come to Bear Lake. I can imagine they were really excited to be able to do that. Of course, not knowing who their driver was. My job was to take them out onto the lake on the houseboat, which a houseboat, I guess you'd assume this, but a houseboat is no speedboat, even though it had some big engines on it. It wasn't a speedboat by any means. And so they would send their employees up, and it would be my job to go down on Monday mornings and entertain them. And they would usually send 2 families up a week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Their stays with me on the houseboat were supposed to be exciting and fun-filled vacations for them. Well, you're probably wondering how I did on the driving. I luckily had a chance before they started coming to go down one day, and it was on a day when the lake was quite calm, and I unhooked it and was able to very carefully maneuver it so that it would get in the little opening in the marina inlet and get out onto the lake. And after I drove it around on there, that I tried a few things to get familiar with how the boat ran. Then I brought it back in and hooked it up, and of course rowed myself over to the side of the marina where I could tie the boat up and wait for another day. So that's kind of how my summer employment was that summer. Before I lead you to believe that I didn't have any problems with the boat, there was one time when I came into the marina and there was very little room to turn around. I remember, and I was not an experienced boater by any means. I hadn't even really driven a boat prior to that one, to speak of anything with any power in it. And anyway, I drove the boat, and when I was backing up, it seemed to be going a little too close to the launch ramp, and so I pressed forward on the throttles to get it to go the other direction, and it did. Then I realized I was going to go, it was going a little faster than I wanted, and it was going to go into the dock, and so I pushed the reverse throttles, and before it finally changed directions, because it had a big bow that reached over the dock walkways, it had actually gone over and bumped into another boat a little bit. It didn't hurt the boat too much, but I had to go through a reporting process with the state parks people and notify the other owner, etc. And of course, I notified the Vicol people. So that was my job for the summer. It sounds idyllic, doesn't it? Just have a summer job, drive around on the lake, and take these people around. In many ways, it was quite interesting because it was a little nerve-wracking because it had 2 decks, and the kids and whatnot would get on the upper deck, and I was always worried that they were going to fall off or have a problem, and so that I had to kind of set some rules down, or else I wasn't even able to drive the boat because I'd be worrying too much. And there were 2 steering wheels on the boat, looked like a big captain's wheel that you could steer by on the main part of the boat, and then one upstairs on the upper part. I don't know the proper names of all the boat parts even now, but that's kind of how it was arranged. And inside, there's a place where you could make beds, and they had dishes, and pretty much a houseboat, I guess, kind of living experience. Well, everything was going really quite well, and it was exciting for a while, but after a little while, it stopped being exciting. And I think sometimes life is like that. We get on the front end of something, and it just seems like, man, this is the life of Riley. This is what I want to do the rest of my life right here. And you get in anyway, or for the rest of the summer, and you get into you're almost euphoric about it. And it's kind of the way I was with this houseboat. But then it's just like anything else. The realities start to set in. The people's kids start to drive you crazy. And the thing that I thought I would like the most turned out to be the thing that I liked almost the least, and that is just cruising the lake. Because I would sit there and watch the water go into the front end of the houseboat for hour after hour after hour, all day long, except for when we'd park and let them go play in this beach somewhere. And it got old. Long story short, it got old watching the water go into the front end of that boat because there was no speed to it. I wasn't throwing wakes and all that stuff that boaters do. It's just a slow, steady journey around the lake, and after you've seen the sights from the lakeside a little bit, why, they got old, and there was some interesting people that I talked to. I enjoyed that part of it. There was one experience that I had that summer that I'll never forget. The people down at Vicol Chemical needed to come up and service the boat, I guess the oil and whatever they do. I don't know. I'm not a mechanic, so I don't know what all they had in mind to do, but they let me know ahead of time that when I got the last family off of it for the week, that they would come up on the weekend, Saturday night and Sunday, and they would service the boat and then put it back so it'd be ready for Monday morning. So they did that. And on Monday morning, I got in my car and I went down. I was supposed to be there, I think, by 8 o'clock, if I remember right. And I looked out to where the boat was in the marina, and I could tell something wasn't quite right. the boat was out there tied up to the buoys like I'd left it all right, but it was kind of cocked off to one side and down the water, and it didn't look good. You can imagine what I was thinking. Anyway, I got in the rowboat and I rowed out to the boat to see just what was going on. And when I got out there, I could see, I got onto the bow of the deck and looked inside a little bit, just enough to see that the water was about halfway up on the fridge door. So I knew that the boat had been swamped somehow, or was in the process of being swamped. Well, I got in my rowboat and rowed back and hurried just as fast as I could over to the state park's office and used their phone and called the people down at Thicol and let them know that I didn't know what was wrong, but their boat was about to go under if they didn't get there and get there fast, because I had no way of getting that problem solved on my own. And they didn't even hardly wait for me to finish the story. They said, "We're on our way right now." And they hung up, and holy cow, they must have flown up there, because it didn't seem like, it's probably almost an hour and 45-minute drive or maybe more. And I swear it wasn't much over an hour, and they were there, it seemed like. And anyway, while they were coming in that hour and 15 minutes or whatever, the people that were coming to get on the boat with their family and have their vacation that they've been waiting for so long and just so excited about, I could see them coming down the walkway of the marina embankment, and they had their little suitcases and bags in hand and their grub, and I had to meet them about halfway down and just tell them that there would be no vacation for them today. Maybe not for a while in the future, because it would be wet and damaged and need lots of tender loving care to get back in shape. And I'll never forget, I'd like to have got to know the people a bit more, but they were just so intent on going onto that boat that they were trying to talk, really just kept asking, "Are you sure? Are you sure we can't go?" And her little family was just so excited. And when I gave them that bad news, they just tried to talk me out of that boat not being flooded and ready to sink. And I've never forgotten the disappointment that they all felt. I could feel it with them. And anyway, it was just a bubble burst right there on the marina embankment, the marina embankment, meaning that where they held the water back and piled in rocks to make the marina. Well, after a while, I got them convinced that they didn't want to sleep in water, and it was going to take some while to dry it, and they might as well get in their car and go find something else to do, because this vacation was not going to work the way they had it planned. And I let them know that it wasn't my fault, because I couldn't think of anything that I'd done. Well, it wasn't too long after that, they all went off in tears, I think. But it wasn't too long after that till the mechanics from Thicol came in their big truck, and of course the first thing they did is hooked onto it and tried to and pulled it over to where they could get it on the trailer, the houseboat trailer, which they had. And sure enough, they were able to pull it over without it sinking and get it on the trailer. And then as they pulled it up out of the embankment on the ramp there, they the water would start to flow out of the boat, and eventually, uh, I couldn't see anything more that I could do, and they said there's nothing more that I could do, um, and that they would handle it. So I left, and they took the boat and went back to Thicol with it, and I was off for a few days. Well, I called to check on it, see what was going on. What had happened is that the mechanics, when they had come to service it, had pulled it out onto their trailer and took it out to service it. And when they put it back in the water, down the ramp and into the water, they had knocked off the depth probes on the bottom of the boat. Now the depth probes were too little. Well, they were only about, I don't know, they only seemed like maybe 4 inches long, but they stuck down below the bottom of the boat, and they would tell you how close you were, how deep the water was, how many feet of water you were boating in. It was interesting because those depth probes would probe at the depth of the lake too in certain places and let you know where the deep spots were and whatever. But when they put it back in the water, they knocked those off, which left a couple little holes in the bottom of the boat, which when they put it back in without knowing that they were knocked off, took it over and reparked it, they didn't know that, and there was just enough water bubbling up through those holes that by the time I got there on Monday, it was, should I say, about ready to sink. It looked to me like it's nothing to laugh about, but doggone it, they should train their mechanics better. So I was off the hook as far as causing the problem, but I've never forgotten that experience, especially that little family that I had somehow, the circumstances had just left them so disappointed because they were going to spend several days out on Bear Lake boating and whatever. The other experience I had on that boat, in addition to day after day after day watching the water go into the front end, is I would take them to some of the better beaches, and I'd throw out the anchor and anchor the boat, and they could go on shore or up on the beaches and just play in the sand. The kids could and have a good time. And I didn't know much about boating, even on Bear Lake, but I knew that because the lake had kind of a north-south orientation, it's about 20 miles long, north and south, and about 7 or 8 miles wide at its widest point, going east and west. And if you should happen to get a north wind or a south wind, it would push the water across the many miles of the lake, and the waves would grow as they blew. So if you had a south wind, the waves on the north end of the lake would be sizable, and that's why the best beaches were there. And if you had a north wind, the waves on the south end of the lake would be sizable. So that's where the better beaches were, and I'd try to pick the right day, and we would watch and park and come and go. And at night, I'd just leave them on the boat at the marina to do whatever, cook their dinners and arrange their sleeping and all of that. Encourage them to be safe. So that all was good. But there was one day when I was on the north end of the lake, and I sensed a south wind blowing. And it took quite a bit of time to travel the distance from the north end to the south end, or not clear to the south end, but back to the marina, which was, roughly midway. I knew I couldn't do it very fast. And the wind kept coming and started building, and I realized that I had to let people know that they had to get on that boat and we had to get going, because if we didn't, we were going to get caught. Well, you probably realize the reason I'm telling the story is because we did get caught. I couldn't get them on the boat fast enough. They didn't see any real need to go that early, and I had to get a little emphatic in order to get them on the boat and get gone before the waves built up. Finally, I got them on the boat, but it was a little bit later than I wanted to. And by the time I got about halfway back to the marina, there were some sizable waves. Well, there's a certain way that you drive into a wave on a boat, and the very best is not to hit it straight on, because it just beats you to death, but to kind of do a slicing pattern on the wave. If you could get an angle that'd take you where you wanted to go. And I had two big twin engines, or twin motors on it. And I was upstairs because I wanted to kind of see the size of the waves and how it would be best. So there was a steering wheel up there. And I went up on that steering wheel and was away from all the kids and stuff, where I could concentrate. Told them all to stay downstairs while I steered it through the problems. Tried to get it back to the marina, even though the waves were higher than I wanted to navigate. And about halfway back, the waves were such that it caused, as I steered, it caused the chain to come off of my steering drive. It steered from up on top, but the chain was hooked to some cogs and whatnot down on the drive line, and the chain came off because the steering was a little stiff due to the waves. Well, so what that meant was I had no way to steer it. Well, as soon as there's no way to steer it, it turns sideways to the waves. So you can kind of imagine what I'm dealing with now. It's turning sideways. Well, as soon as I realize that, I'm on the ladder going downstairs just as fast as I can to get to the other steering steering wheel, and holding on to the boat and telling everybody to hang on and that I was coming. And anyway, it turned sideways, and before I could get down there, it was really rocking the boat. I mean, that might be an understatement. It was a big boat. It was up in the air quite a ways, and they're just not made like wave cutter boats, if you can imagine. Anyways, turned sideways, and it was getting quite a rocky motion, and the dishes in the cupboards were coming out and falling on the floor and crashing and banging. And I tried to get him to hold the cupboards and hang on, and I'd get to the steering wheel. Well, I finally got it straightened out and headed back into the waves and get cut down on the rocking, and and we finally did make it back to the marina, and we got settled down just fine. Ended up having to replace some dishes and a few things, but luckily nobody fell off. And anyway, I always have thought back to those experiences and thought, I didn't know much about boating, but somebody trusted me. And some of the common sense that I'd learned on the farm turned out to pay off for me, because I knew a little about machinery in general. And I'd picked up on the boating thing. I'd done enough of it that I could pick up on it. And I knew the lake. I knew that south wind meant danger for us on the north end. And if I hadn't left when I did, it could have been a whole lot worse. So I felt blessed after the whole experience. I remember kind of breathing under my breath, saying, "Dear Lord, help me out of this." And He did. And there wasn't any tragedies. There's been a lot of tragedies on Bear Lake. People lose their lives there every year. I've lost some friends there, more than one. people that I knew. I couldn't say that they were really close friends, but they were people that I knew and I would call friends. And I always told my own children and others that have come, that would come and recreate at the lake, especially if they're on the water. I would tell them to respect that lake, respect it, because it could sneak you a surprise real quick if you weren't alert and aware that it can cause some damages and there could be lives lost. Well, I boated on it quite a bit since those days, but those experiences of that first real summer that I had at Bear Lake stuck with me for a long time, and still today I think back on it. I think it's one of the ways that the Lord had it teaching me how to work through a trial. You know, we have a tendency to think that if we have a trial in our life, God just doesn't love us anymore, or he doesn't care about us. And I've learned through my life, not just with this experiences, but countless others that I can't go into right now, countless others, seriously, that God put us on this earth to experience trouble and make choices in the middle of it. Sometimes those choices are moral choices, the choice between doing something right and doing something wrong. Sometimes those choices might be trying to get that upper steering wheel to work or getting to the lower steering wheel. You know, it may be really important, but there may not be a moral choice. But even in those circumstances, even when there doesn't seem to be a moral choice, I think if you're in tune with the Spirit will dictate to you. It might dictate to you which college to go to, which woman to marry, who to date, which party to go to or stay home from. It could dictate any number of things if you've honed the Spirit enough that you recognize it for what it is and you feel the nudgings. Those nudgings might be something as simple as telling the kids on that boat and their parents to hang onto a rope or to do this or to do that when there's a crisis on. It might be just a nudging of how to deal with a disappointed family that came up and realized they didn't have a boat to spend their dream vacation on. How to ease the blow. How to send them away knowing how to deal with disappointment. And you feeling their disappointment. Because I really honestly felt their disappointment. Those poor little kids. And their parents had built them up to really look forward to something. Well, I won't go into more into that particular boat and those boating experiences other than to say that life comes at us. Sometimes we're just thinking we got things locked up and everything's going to be rosy. And sometimes we think, oh boy, what am I into? And I'll just say one other thing about that boat and the whole experience, because quite often I had to boat on Sundays because the people would usually leave on Sunday afternoons. I mentioned Saturday, but it's actually Sunday afternoons that they left on. And it was caused me that by the time I got them down and off the boat and on their way, even though we didn't do much boating on that day, it made it so that I couldn't attend my church meetings like I normally had done all my life. I shouldn't say all my life. There was times when I was going to college that I wasn't very faithful. But my parents were church-going people, and they taught me to do the same. And I tried, not as hard as I should have done while I was going to college, my college years. And we were traveling home a lot too, so we never got really established in a congregation. But I'll never forget going back in the fall after being out for a summer, because when we went back, the very first song that they sang just sent chills up my spine and made me feel so good. It was "Put Your Shoulder to the Wheel, Push Along." I don't know if you remember the song, but it goes, "Put your shoulder to the wheel, push along. Do your duty with a heart full of song. Let no man shirk, or let all must work. Let no man shirk. Put your shoulder to the wheel." That's kind of the tune. and with the whole congregation singing that, to this day I can remember thinking, I do need to put my shoulder to the wheel. It feels good again. It feels good to get back into the swing of things, where people could visit with you and socialize, and you work for a common cause. You get taught right from wrong. The church, the gospel, was meaningful to me in ways that I didn't realize. And when I sang that song after being out of the church on the Sabbath day for all those weeks, that particular song just sunk right to my heart. So, experiences happen for a reason, and we don't always make the right choices, but sooner or later, if we listen and obey and practice the promptings, I guess we could say, then eventually you end up on top. Maybe not the very top, but on top of your trials and ready to face the wind. Opposition is part of life, whether it's a rocking houseboat or a sinking houseboat or a sinking feeling that we have in our hearts when something goes bad. It's all for a purpose, and we need to realize it and deal with it on that level. Well, hopefully you don't have to have some of those experiences. Not too many people drive a 38-foot houseboat on a lake all summer long, but I did, and it taught me. And I hope what I've learned has helped teach you some things that maybe you can benefit from. Good night. Love you all.